So we want to welcome and thank Alan for giving us his time today. And I think a lot of us either have read or personally know Hozan. He founded the Clearview Project and manages that today. As we were waiting for folks to come in, we had a nice chat about Bangladesh. We both, Hozan's been to Bangladesh a few times, as I have been too. So we were comparing stories about that country. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute myself and pass the microphone to Hozan and let him share with us this morning. And once again, thank you all for coming. So, Hozan, you want to take it over?
Thank you. Good, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. Um, Wonderful to see you, Eve, and Kirsten. I know you, and I may know some of you. I'm not quite sure, but I'm really happy to be here this morning. We are waiting a one of those humongous uh, atmospheric rivers to flow through Northern California, and it's really dark outside and ominous, and you can feel that heaviness in the air, uh, but lightness in this room. Um, I think I'm going to start with a song, if that's okay. Uh, and some of you have heard it. This is a song that is essentially chapter 20 of the Lotus Sutra. And some of you should excuse me. I know some of you have heard this before, maybe quite a few times. And it was written by two friends of mine at Tassajara, and I've been singing it for a long time. And it's about our practice and what we aspire to. It's called Our Hero, and you should excuse my morning voice. There's a book called the Lotus Sutra that you really ought to know about. A holy book that has the power to remove all fear and doubt. And this book tells the story of a man who means the world to me. He could just as well have been a woman, except for male hegemony. So they call him the Bodhisattva, never disparage, the Bodhisattva, never despise. And I'm making it my life's ambition to see the world through his pure eyes. Now here's a chorus which will repeat a number of times. I will never disparage you or keep you at arm's length, where you only see your weaknesses, I only see your strength. I would never despise you or put you down in any way, because it's clear to me, I can plainly see you'll be a Buddha someday. I love you. Now the Bodhisattva, never disparaging, lived countless kalpas in the past, in the time of the counterfeit Dharma, and he was something of an outcast, because the monks and nuns of his time, they were noted for their arrogance and vanity. These were the folks who exercised great power and authority, but my boy, he never concerned himself if they treated him like a freak. He just bowed to everybody equally, and these are the words he'd speak. I would never disparage you or keep you at arm's length, where you only see your weaknesses, I only see your strength. I would never despise you or put you down in any way, because it's clear to me, I can plainly see you'll be a Buddha someday. I love you. He never read or recited the scriptures much. He only liked to practice respect. But the monks and nuns of his time, they didn't meet it like you might expect. Instead, they cursed him, and they reviled him, and they wished that he would go. Because they all had self-esteem issues, like everybody else I know. So they beat him and pelted him with clubs and stones, tried to drive him away. But he'd just run off to a safe distance, and he'd turn around and say, I would never disparage you or keep you at arm's length. You only see your weaknesses, I only see your strength. I would never despise you or put you down in any way, because it's clear to me, I can plainly see, you'll be a Buddha someday. I love you. So it went on for years and years. He was the target of scorn and abuse. Still our hero, he shed no tears, nor did he ever wonder what's the use. Till he came to the end of his natural lifespan, he lay down fixing to die. And he heard the Holy Lotus Sutra being preached up in the sky, and his life was extended for millions of years. He's living to this day. And in the pages of the Lotus Sutra, you still can hear him say, I would never disparage you or keep you at arm's length, where you only see your weaknesses, I only see your strength. I would never despise you or put you down in any way, because it's clear to me, I can plainly see, you'll be a Buddha someday. Yes, it's clear to me, I can plainly see, you'll be a Buddha someday. I love you. I love you. Thank you. So that sets the tone for me. That's, you know, I've been teaching for a long time in the Upaya chaplaincy program. And one of the things that we invite students to do in the course of the program is to arrive at, I think what Thich Nhat Hanh called a North Star precept. It's like the North Star where if you look at the Big Dipper, it always points to the North Stars. You always know where you are headed or where you're headed in relationship to that star. And that's, I think, what is meant by this precept. So it's a wonderful exercise, if you haven't done it, to try to understand what your North Star precept is. What guides you? What is it that you return to when there's confusion or dislocation? So for me, my North Star precept is, I will not abandon you. And that's what the Bodhisattva Never Disparaging is teaching. I will not abandon you. That whole lesson, which is a pivotal chapter in the Lotus Sutra, is driving this home. And I think it comes up as an issue for all of us, because there are places where, by habit or by feeling, we wish to turn away. And to have that as a North Star precept, not to abandon, allows us to reorient ourselves. So where it came about for me was in Sangha life here in Berkeley. There was one person in particular who was very troubled, was at risk of being out in the street multiple times, and was always looking for people to rescue them. And I'm sure that we've all experienced people like that in our lives. And what this person wanted was only everything. You know, they wanted to be relieved from suffering, and they wanted you to do it, and they communicated the sense that only you could do it, which is not such an unusual feeling. And so my wife Lori and I came to the place where we said to this person, I will not abandon you. And that didn't mean that we were going to rescue them or save them, but that we would not turn away. In the song, there's a critical line. Where he says, well, they beat him and pelted him with clubs and stones and tried to drive him away. But he just run off to a safe distance and he'd turn around and say. So, yes, we may need a safe distance. That everything that every engagement that we have with suffering doesn't necessarily mean that we have to embrace it and merge with it. In fact, when we do that, we may not necessarily be helpful. So we have to understand our own space, our own boundaries, and have a safe distance, but not turn away. And when you have that, then you build relationship and you can approach. And maybe there will be a time when embrace is called for. But I will say that not abandoning, not disparaging is not necessarily easy all the time. And at the same time, I can report that we remain in relationship with this person, and they have been in relationship to our Sangha in Berkeley now for 25 years. Even though it looked like their very existence was touch and go for a long time, there's something about us, that can be very fragile and at the same time tough. That you might be able to draw on unusual and unseen strengths at the same time as the conditions of our lives may be fragile. So that's what that song brings up for me. And uh, I wrote about it. I should plug this, I guess. I have a new book, uh, which is blurred out of focus. It's called Turning Words: Transformative Encounters with Buddhist Teachers. And there's uh, it's not all Buddhist teachers. Some of it's Buddhist friends. A couple who are not even Buddhists. Uh, there's there's pieces about people that you will know in here. Some people in the Peacemaker Circle. There's a short piece on Bernie and on Roshi Joan and other figures that you would recognize. Um, and there's a section on what I identify as uh, teachings that have been meaningful or transformative to me, uh, coming from my own practice, and this North Star precept, and this "I will not abandon you" is one of them. So you can check this out. It's available at better bookstores and your vendor of choice, published by Shambhala. Um, this not turning away, not abandoning. Uh, I very much I rely on actually the three tenets as a guide, uh, and I'll I have a question for you, for the collective, you guys, when in after I finish saying what I'm going to say about the three tenets, but uh, they lead me through this process of not abandoning. So entering the space of not knowing in any situation and bearing witness to what is happening in that circumstance. What's happening internally, what's happening in the environment around me. Uh, on another level, it's like, well, how does this all work? What systems are unfolding here that would be helpful to understand? And then my gloss on the third tenet is an appropriate response. Uh, there's a koan to uh, what is the I think it's what is the meaning of the of the Buddha's lifetime of practice, and teacher says an appropriate response, and that response includes love at every level or at any level. Love as, say, laid out by the four Brahma Viharas, uh, but it's just what response comes out of this space of not knowing and bearing witness. And that's been really, really important to me. Um, I teach it a lot, and I teach it to myself. So, like many of you, uh, I have been in spaces of suffering. Uh, Jeff and I were talking before the session started about uh, our experiences in Bangladesh, which is just a mind-boggling place. The first time I was in Bangladesh, I was alone, and I took uh, an automobile rickshaw uh, into town, and once you got into Dhaka, which is absolutely humongous city, enormously poor, uh, and seemingly anarchic. Uh, the traffic, people drive wherever they want. Just there's no like left side, right side. It's wherever they want, and they drive these horribly polluting uh, the two-stroke engines, which are billowing smoke, and it was just virtually unbreathable and completely chaotic. And I remember sitting in this rickshaw. You know, the initial response was to be appalled, and the secondary response was just completely to break into laughter because it was so over the top. Uh, and I think about my experiences in refugee camps on the Burma border, now going back almost 30 years, actually. Uh, and then working with Ambedkarite, ex-untouchable communities in India, uh, which is a relationship that has been ripening now for about 15 years. And I think about there's part of me often that wants to turn away. And then I let the North Star precept guide me. And I turn back towards. And I wonder, uh, I've wondered, why am I called here? What calls me to this? And some years ago, I realized if I think about, excuse me, I'm very dry tonight. What I've encountered on the Burmese border and in India, it reminds me of my grandparents. So the Indian slums are horizontal. I don't know if you've ever been in them. They're quite amazing. Uh, and about 110, 115 years ago, my grandparents' parents came to New York. And they lived in what would be called slums and tenements, except that those tenements were vertical. And so while if you go to an Indian slum, what you find are a whole population of people who came from a particular village or region in a rural area. Well, in my grandparents' and great grandparents' time in New York, uh, they all came from the same town in Eastern Europe, and they lived in this village. Not only that, but now when I go to uh, my grandparents' gravesite, well, the whole village is buried in that gravesite. It's all buried in Moonachie, New Jersey, in some cemetery overlooking uh, what you call it, I'm forgetting the name of the big stadium there, the one where purportedly Jimmy Hoffa has been encased in cement. Anyway,
Is it the Meadowlands?
Meadowlands, that's it, yes. Anyway, I realized that's why I'm called to bear witness, because it's not so far from the reality that my grandparents and their parents lived under oppression and threat and violence in Eastern Europe. And it's like, so that is in me deeply. And so part of the bearing witness is to recognize what's working in me internally. And how is that, and then how is that connected to the wider world? In another related teaching that's relevant here, I think, is in the Platform Sutra of the Sixth Ancestor. There's an ordination ceremony, and the ordination ceremony, towards the beginning of it, there's Huineng, the Sixth Ancestor's version of the Bodhisattva vows. And his first vow is, sentient beings of my mind are numberless. I vow to save them. So that's a little different than the conventional translations that we have, and I'm not sure which ones you have, if there's a liturgy for ZPI. But like in Berkeley, we say, sentient beings are numberless. I vow to awaken with them, or I vow to save them, or I vow to take them across. But sentient beings of my mind are numberless. So that exists. Sentient beings of my mind, you can look at from different angles. One angle is all the beings that make up or that are likely to arise in us at any given moment. At the age of 75, there's still the 5-year-old in me. And there's the 17-year-old in me, and there's the 90-year-old in me. And there's in Buddhist cosmology, we have the 6 realms. The human realm, the godlike realm, the fighting demons, the animals, the hell beings, and the hungry ghosts. And with any emotional state that arises, we're likely to be reborn in that instant as one of those beings. And I feel that is just a rough map of the countless states of existence that we can transmigrate through in a moment. So, in order to save these sentient beings of my mind, I need to have the exact attitude that the Bodhisattva Never Disparaging has. At the end of every verse it says, I love you. So to have unconditional love for these beings, and to do one's best to respect them, not suppress them, and at the same time not let them run the show. So that's the internal dimension. from another angle, everybody that I'm seeing in this screen right now is a sentient being of my mind. And everybody being that you're seeing is a sentient being of your mind. That mind is not restricted to whatever there is within this bowl of bone on my head. Mind is what Suzuki Roshi referred to as big mind. Mind is all inclusive. And so if everyone is part of the whole of one's being, then that calls again for care and respect. And I think we experience this in different circumstances. For me, often it was coming into these places and seeing the children and having this very visceral sense that all these children were like my children. And in fact, in terms of their capability as humans, they all start with roughly the same capacities, roughly the same human capacities. Everyone's a little different, but they all begin as fully functioning organisms of a miraculous sort. I mean, that functioning is miraculous functioning. So I really try to when I'm teaching in India or in some other places, it's really important for me to enter in a state of not knowing, which does not mean stupidity. It means inquiry. It means, how is it here? What can you show me or tell me about your life? And it's really important because that's also a way of deconstructing our own perceptions about other beings, other cultures. So instead of making assumptions, or instead of having unconscious assumptions, to just come in questioning, to come in recognizing. There's a term I'm sorry, I'm sort of going stream of consciousness here. I hope that's okay. So in our Sangha, we have been working through a 9-month program called Many Communities, One Sangha. It was developed by a number of people around East Bay Meditation Center. You may know of some of them, Mushim Ikeda and Crystal Johnson, and also Rhonda McGee. And we've been really fortunate that we've been meeting every other month with Rhonda. And the unit that we had last week, that we're in small groups and in whole groups at the same time. And the purpose of this is to broaden our understanding of equity, equality, inclusivity, in relation to various kinds of diversity. And so the unit that we had last week was on cultural humility, which was a term that I had not been familiar with, though it made complete sense. But it's very different from, a term that I've been aware of in the past of cultural competency. But in a way, it's like turned inside out, because it's recognizing that when it comes to different cultures, I have a fundamental incompetency, and that I need to invoke humility, which is really the same as not knowing. Or it's the same as not knowing and then bearing witness. And so that's part of what we're engaged in. That's part of the attitude that I try to bring to work when I'm moving into another cultural setting. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful, because I actually am very interested in this. I'm really interested in learning how people live, how people practice, what they do to sustain themselves. So I've been speaking very broadly. One of the things that the book that I wrote is full of very short sketches and stories that are about particular moments of bearing witness, and ones that turn to me. And a number of them have been teachers and circumstances that I encountered in Asia over the years. And I feel really fortunate this winter, because I've been teaching a course at Union Theological Seminary on engaged Buddhism in Asia. My friend, you may know Kosen Greg Snyder. He's a teacher at Brooklyn Zen Center, and he began this engaged Buddhist program at Union, and right now he's going through a course of chemo, and so he asked me to teach this, and I am learning so much, and it's really shifting my understanding of what I thought I knew, and a lot of what I had experienced directly in my encounters in Asia. But what I'm learning, it's like drinking out of a fire hose, is how deep the roots are of even modern engaged Buddhism in Asia, and how widely people were influenced by others who have been pursuing similar interests, and that it's very different than the great man, and it's usually a man, theory of social change. So we read of figures like, we read of Thich Nhat Hanh, or we know of Thich Nhat Hanh, and we see his books, but we don't know about who was influencing Thich Nhat Hanh? What sources were there that he was drawing from? And they're large, and they go in unexpected directions. They go back, some of them go very directly uh, to a great figure at the early 20th century in China, Taishu, who I had never really heard of, or his disciple Yin Shun, who is uh, basically the teacher, the kind of a source influence for all the Taiwanese Buddhist humanism centers, which are another expression of engaged Buddhism. And for Taishu, who I referred to a moment earlier, Taishu was very interested in classical anarchism. And so there are Asian roots and there are Western influences, and all of these things are really intertwined in such a rich way. The same thing is true of Dr. Ambedkar, the pivotal figure of Buddhist revival and Buddhist re-identification of untouchable peoples in India. And I would say I call myself an Ambedkarite, and I've been studying this for quite a long time, and I relate so closely with those communities. But then you find, Ambedkar didn't arise like Venus on the half shell rising from the waves. He had intellectual forebears, and we all have intellectual forebears. We look to Bernie and CPI, but Bernie did not arise out of whole cloth. There's this, there's a meeting of all of our teachers, and then there's what we bring to it to make it authentic ourselves, to make it an authentic experience for ourselves. So I think of this in the way that I think of the musics that I play. I've been playing sort of so-called vernacular or folk musics for 60 years now, which is a terrifying thought. And we began by listening to all the recordings that we could, as closely as we could, and trying to imitate those styles and musical approaches. And then as we got some competence in them, we had the confidence to go and meet the older musicians and learn from them directly and be able to function with some sense of cultural authenticity to where we were accepted. And I've been through this. I mean, I've been in situations where, down south where we literally literally tested, like, it's visit this older musician and he would say, okay, play something for me, and if you pass the test, you passed the test when he sent for his instrument. And that was a great feeling. But ultimately, we have to bear witness to ourselves. And the appropriate response is to be ourselves, fully honoring and respecting the traditions or the sources that we come from, and yet not to be imitative. To find where that leads, in the same sense that when I think about lineage, and this is true for each of us. For me, I feel like I am at the convergence of two major rivers where it becomes a new river. There's the Japanese Soto lineage that flowed through Suzuki Roshi and through my old teacher, Sojun Roshi. And then there's this Eastern European Jewish lineage that flows through my grandparents and their parents. And they meet in me. And I have to do something that is, I have to manifest in a way that is a new river that contains the waters of each of those rivers, but is a new river in and of itself. And to be authentic about that expression and at the same time fully human. So, I think I want to open up to questions, but I have a question for you guys first. Something that has been, I've been trying to figure this out. Literally, where do the three tenets come from? When and how were they created and articulated first? And if somebody knows that, I'd be very grateful. I mean, I've done a lot of digging around through stuff that Bernie's written and other people have written, and it sort of gets to a certain point, and then there's this is sort of cloudy vagueness. So if anyone knows, Eve, you might know, or somebody there might know. I'd really like to know.
Alan, I can just tell you when I first heard them. So Bernie did in January 94, a 55th birthday speech in front of the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah.
And then in May, I accompanied him to Switzerland for a conference, Buddhist Christian conference. And I remember very clearly we were met at the airport and we were taken to this house of a very lovely woman and to have lunch. And as she was bringing the lunch out from the kitchen, we were on the terrace there. And he's kind of looking thoughtful. And then he's saying to me, Eve, I've come up, I think I really have these three tenets or these three principles that I think really, I don't know how he put it, but they really almost epitomize the practice, but in very clear, simple words. And he said that, and he said the first is not knowing. And then he said bearing witness, which had all kinds of implications later. If that was a good term, not a good term, with the Christian origins of bearing witness, all kinds of things like that. And then at that point, he said love. I can't remember what was the.
There are a lot of different versions.
There are different versions. So loving action came later when he lost his second wife, Jishu.
Right.
Before that, it was a different kind of action. But it doesn't matter because appropriate response was also his answer. He loved appropriate response, and he used to repeat it so often that people got annoyed, and they would say, "Yes, but what is that? What is?"
I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah. He loved that. That Uman. I think Uman koan.
Yeah, it's Uman. Yeah.
So anyway, but I remember it was then. It was like May 94. It was after that. So he must have been kind of taking it. And now I remember just sitting on that deck in Zurich, just right over Zurich, and hearing that for the first time. And it sounded so simple. It didn't sound like anything like a big deal, but he clearly was very taken with it. like, oh, I see now kind of thing. And I'm kind of just shrugging in that stupid way of like, oh, so what's the big deal? But for him, it was a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's really a wonderful formulation. And I like bearing witness because I like there's it's quite multivalent to me. There's because bearing is very complex. Yes, it has a there's a Christian uh, angle to it, but there's also there's the angle of like bearing, being able to endure what you witness, and there's also uh, bearing as an active verb, which is carrying your witness to others. That's the to me the responsibilities is once once you've once you have been seeing and taking in what's going on, then you have a responsibility to carry this to others. So it's a wonderful uh, the multitude of meanings there. Anyway, I wanted to open up. What would you all like to talk about, or what would you like to know?
Hosan, if I can assist here a little bit. If anybody wants to speak, I can see everybody, so you can use your actual hand to wave versus your electronic hand if you'd like. So please, we have a little bit of time, so step forward if you'd like. Hosan, I'll go ahead and fill in here, and maybe
Okay.
something will occur to folks. Um, Early on, as you were talking, um, and I can't quote your North Star, I will not abandon you.
Yeah.
Um, I was just really touched by you talking about, you know, people in our lives. But here's my story about this. So I've encountered people in my lives that are so toxic and dangerous. I just really needed to, to not be with them any longer, to not be in relationship with them any longer. And you made me realize that I still am, nonetheless. I can't not be, right? Even though I may not speak with them or spend time in the same place with them. Um, and there are only a couple of these people in my
Yeah.
life, but it and again, my story to myself is that this is for mental health and self protection,
Right.
and I'm not sure that's true. You made me really question that. Um, is it is it something else? So I'm going to noodle on that for a bit. So I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you. Well, I have a just a response. Um, yeah, I think there's often people like that in our lives, and we do remain in relationship with them, in potential relationship with them directly, but in relationship in our minds. And like I have a friend who is notoriously difficult, uh, and he's driven away almost everybody except about four people. And there's also something really, he's remarkable. He's a remarkable uh, artist. There's a fundamental warmth in his heart. He's not sociopathic. Uh, there's a fundamental warmth, and there's some fundamental pain or contradiction internally. And at a certain point, he did some things that were very painful and insulting to me. And I spent a while just kind of writhing around in that and just feeling this is not fair. Why is he doing this? So forth. And finally, I decided I'm not going to make any efforts to reach out to him, but when we might encounter each other, casually, I'm going to be respectfully friendly. I'm going to say hello. I'm going to not shun him and not avoid him, not abandon him. And at the least, I can do that. That went on for about 10 years. And one day, he called me to ask a favor, to help him with something. And I just felt, oh, this is an opening. And so I just did. And so we've rebuilt a friendship from that, which is not to say that I'm going to cease being watchful. But it's like I haven't thrown out the connection that's actually there. And so I take the long view of relationships. And I think that just by virtue, characterologically, it's what I'm inclined to do. And now I have some practice methodology for doing it.
Yeah, that resonates. The the practice of just waiting, not turning away, not making a decision, not fixing any kind of a thought, but just waiting. One of my daughters and I had a dust up, I don't know, 15 years ago or so, and she didn't speak to me for a year, and it was painful. But I that's what I did. I just waited.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, let her know I'm here when you want to talk, but not in any kind of a needy way. I didn't need her to do anything at all other than take care of what she needed to take care of, and it worked out. We're best friends now, so it's a lot to be said for that. Jacqueline, thank you. Yes, we have time for comments or questions from anyone.
I want to thank you, Hosen, for today and for just that phrase of "I will not abandon you." It's so powerful. It's like it's so powerful on the level of bearing witness and not knowing, because I think that there's a natural tendency in myself and probably others too, when you feel that somebody's creating pain, to kind of curl into yourself like a sea anemone.
Sure.
And it's just a really intriguing practice to watch that moment of wanting to withdraw from the painful situation and remembering that I will not abandon you, in the same breath of I got to get out of here. And so I thank you for that. It's very very good practice, and I'm going to take it into my life. So
good. Yeah, it's not easy practice. It's easy it's easy to say. It's easy to conjure up. It's not so easy to do.
No.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Anyone else? We have a little time. William and then Petra.
Great. So I'm Bill Schubert.
Where are you, by the way?
How am I?
Where are you?
Oh, I'm I'm in San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Ah, you're Bill. Hi, Bill.
Pretty recent transplant. So I don't know. I kind of have maybe the obverse, observation on the whole thing because I'm listening to us talk liturgy, and I don't know about anybody else, but when I say something uh, too often in my mind, or I try and carry it with me, it loses its meaning, and then I get very neurotic, and I've learned to let things go. But um, in other words, it's like when the rock splashes in the water, and if somebody tells me the three tenets, boom, I got it. If I try and chase those waves, it doesn't work for me. So I find myself thinking whether this is really an intuitive process. It feels to me like, say, does Mother Teresa uh, tell herself the three tenets? Or, you can think of anyone who's selflessly, given themselves, Zen or not Zen. And it feels to me like they probably have an equivalent instinct, but without a the liturgy. So it feels to me like I think for me anyway, what I think we're talking about is something that kind of comes naturally um, to anybody who's
Yeah.
practices simple awareness.
Well, that's a really it's an I understand what you're saying, and I have no argument with it at all. I think it's different strokes for different folks. Um, and uh, you know, I do work very much from this intuitive sense, but I've also been really helped by formulations. That just works for me, and it may not work for you. That's understandable. Um, something I was going to say. I think there's also a question of how one holds these things in mind. So here's an example. One of the things that I learned working at Upaya, uh, that was part of their meditation instruction that I had wasn't part of the meditation instruction that I uh, was given. It had to do with the idea of raising bodhicitta at the beginning of a session of zazen. And I liked the idea of it, and I came to a phrase. So bodhicitta is the enlightening mind. It's a mind uh, that selflessly communicates awakening to other beings, and we do this in an intuitive and natural way. It's not like some direct communication or something that you transmit. But anyway, I came up with this phrase: uh, "May I be awake that others may awaken." And I say this to myself silently 3 times at the beginning of each period of zazen. And my feeling about it is I do it lightly. And it's like dropping a pebble in the pond. I do it and I don't, and then I completely let it go. I don't think about it anymore, but It has some subtle influence for me. So, and there's various ways, you know, if you're doing koan introspection, which I'm sure some of you are, there's various ways of carrying your koans. Some of it is an intense concentration, intense focus, and sometimes it's just carrying it very lightly, almost formlessly, and letting it just work on your mind. And different teachers will have different approaches. I think that different people will approach their koans and the questions of their lives in different ways, and that's fine. I wasn't prescribing something. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill. Petra, you had your hand up earlier?
Yeah. Thank you, Ellen, for bringing in the North Star and the three tenets, because I know when I did the exercise with the North Star during chaplaincy, my North Star was something around not knowing, and I don't know exactly how to formulate it, but you know, not knowing. It's for me, it's such a difficult practice. And I'm now in an Eco Dharma program, and someone said, imagine that the climate crisis also can bring something good. And you know, for me, that was really stepping into not knowing, because I couldn't imagine, or can't imagine even, that the climate crisis can bring something good. And then they meant by not doing all the things we want to do to solve the climate crisis. And I realized how difficult not knowing was, or is. Because it's so hard for me to imagine that don't do anything about the climate crisis and there can be something good. And that I was realizing during your talk.
That's really good. That's really helpful. Some of us, and I come from this background, have a very strong propensity for knowing or for thinking we know. And not knowing is such a great medicine for that. And of course, it's the same as Suzuki Roshi's beginner's mind, right? In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. And I encountered somebody, we had sesshin on Saturday, and there was a person who just came because she saw there was a one-day sitting I saw it on the website, and she had never been to Zendo. She had never done any formal meditation. And, you know, she said, well, I spent the morning being completely confused about what was going on. I said, that's great. You know, that's not knowing. That's like the many possibilities. And it's like, how are you in that? You know? And this is what we learned, like, how can we be in that state without being completely how can we remain in that state and be open? That's really the challenge, and it's hard.
Thank you, Petra. Hi, Eve.
Thank you very, very much for your talk, Alan.
Thanks, Eve.
And it's so nice to see you anyway.
You too.
What do you think of the word toxic that has appeared in our culture over the last 5-10 years? I think in maybe a very toxic way, but it's almost rampant in how we speak, that this person is toxic for me, this family is toxic for me, this political thing is toxic for me. And when I'm thinking of the talk you gave about not abandoning anyone, I was wondering what your response to the word toxic is.
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't use that word very much. But what comes to mind is medicine, is the distinction between medicine and food. That medicine is not food. And if consumed as food, then it's going to be toxic. But if consumed in such a way as to bring us back into some balance, then it's medicine. And I think that about uh, maybe about there's some things that are unacceptable, and I think I recall having some argument with Bernie about whether everything was an opinion. And I come to think of it, that's a reformulation of uh, a Yogacara perspective on mind. Uh, but I was thinking like, so was the Holocaust an opinion? Was Hiroshima an opinion? And I think that every teaching is a medicine. Everything the Buddha said was a medicine. Everything that he said was actually in response to something that was asked or said to him. And, if taken as absolute truth, then it's going to make you sick, which is what toxicity does. But if taken as medicine to bring you back to balance, then it can have a healing effect. So I don't know. It's the question. I guess there's a question: is there evil in the world? Maybe so. But I also think that I want to cultivate at least the capacity to try to be in communication with anyone that I encounter. I may fail. And that failure may not be necessarily my fault or my shortcoming. It might be something that's shared. But I don't know. I guess I have similar questions about the use of toxicity because it's an othering. And I think it's quite consciously that's what the intention of it is. And I'd like to be very careful. I'd like to know when I'm doing it and not have that be a simple, a matter of sort of a simple word. What do you think? Is there evil? Is there something toxic? Is that a potentiality? Can't hear you.
You're asking me, all of us?
Well, I'm asking you and all of us. Yeah.
Uh, no, I don't like the word toxic. That's my opinion. I'm aware of the importance sometimes, as you said earlier, of stepping away, giving yourself some safe ground when you're with certain people in certain situations.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everybody brings up things like the Holocaust or Stalin. And
Right.
um, I'm remembering a story, a friend of mine who's a daughter of one of the German officers who conspired against Hitler and paid in a terrible way.
Yeah.
But it was both her uncle and father, and the uncle wanted to kill it. Was close enough to Hitler, wanted to kill him, and basically the father, a very strict Christian, really didn't want that to happen. And finally, they came to agreement at a particular event when they would be close to him. He had a gun and he could turn around and shoot the Fuhrer. But when he said that he wanted to do that, he said, I know I'm going to go to hell for all the rest of my lifetimes. Because he was a very religious man. And he thought that just taking a gun out and it's going to be cold-blooded murder. There's no question. He's going to pay the price, and however he understood it.
Right.
So he understood there was a price, I guess is what I'm
Right.
trying to. He clearly saw Hitler as a very dangerous, toxic man. And so he felt he had to do something. And there was a price. It wasn't like good or bad or anything. He was going to step into that field of responsibility and say, yeah, there's all kinds of different energies going on here. This is the best I can do in terms of my understanding. And there's a big price here.
Right. So we have that price is, in Buddhist terms is karma. And to make a decision like that is to accept the karmic fruit of those actions. And so there might be a beneficial dimension to that action, but there also would be, a consequence for oneself. So, yeah, these are complicated ethical questions. I couldn't see. Robert, did you sort of have your hand up? I wasn't sure. No, okay.
We have a couple more minutes here. If anyone else has a comment or a question, Eve, thank you for that. That is provocative. Graham, from over there.
There we are, unmuted. The idea, everything that's been said up to now has put the thought into my mind that an appropriate response unpacks into a lifetime of practice, because we just don't know the outcome of our response,
Right.
And how appropriate that response is. And we just have to keep plugging away at meditation practice. And we may never achieve an appropriate response because we never know the outcome of our actions. And if we do achieve an appropriate response, we probably won't know it either.
Well, this is the distinction between early Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. And this conversation I've had with Bhikkhu Bodhi, and what he was saying, and what I find in the early Pali literature, it does not admit of ambiguity. Things are wholesome, unwholesome, or neutral. That's it. It's quite binary, or tertiary, if you wish. And this is so much in distinction to what we have as the perspective of non-duality, of not one, not two. And so everything, for example, I talk about this elsewhere in something I've written. We think about Buddhist guidelines for speech, which are roughly, is it true, useful, timely, and beneficial. And this all sounds, these are really wonderful conditions to apply to one's speech. But when you really look at them closely, you know, true? Is what's true for me true for you? Is there an absolute truth? I don't think so. And we go through the whole list, and there's ambiguity, at least in my perspective, in each of them. So the only thing that we can do by way of an appropriate response is we have to weigh this dynamic of intention and impact. So we need to really clarify our intention. That's simple. Is my intention to connect with you, or is my intention to divide? If my intention is to divide, then that's probably not a good idea. If my intention is to connect, then that's okay. That goes in the direction of an appropriate response. But you also then have to go back through the three tenets again, all over again, and to understand what the impact is. So we offer an appropriate response, and we don't know. We're not knowing what the effect of that's going to be. So we have to go through this whole process again, endlessly, to see what the impact is, because the impact, if it's, it can be, the intention can be to connect, and the impact can be to divide, and so we have to recalibrate. So so even an appropriate response is conditional, and we have to investigate it. But we can't be paralyzed either. We actually have to act. So we pays our money and we takes our choice. Petra?
I really liked it when Bernie changed the third tenet, loving action, into action or response arising from not knowing and bearing witness. And maybe we now have to say action arising from not knowing and bearing witness at this moment.
Yeah. That doesn't resonate with me. Those formulations don't resonate with me, ideally, because it seems somewhat circular. But that's just me, and I recognize I'm rewriting something, but I'm not rewriting gospel. I'm just doing what I think is appropriate. But I think, all of them, loving action, compassionate action, action that flows from not knowing the bearing witness, these are appropriate responses. They all have some accuracy, nothing wrong with them. Well, there's time for maybe one more, and then I need to go.
Anybody here?
Well, I just feel that we never know the right thing to do, what its effect will be. But the theory that the universe bends in a direction, I mean, I just think that you throw your action out there, and if it's wrong, you'll fix it, or somebody else will.
Yeah.
So we all do our best all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's quotations like the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, something like that. I don't believe that.
Okay.
What I believe is the arc of the universe is long, and we are responsible to bend it towards justice. It's not going to do that of itself. It's contingent upon our action, our bodhisattva action. And so to that extent, often in Zen, people are talking about enlightenment. And I think of it in terms of enlightened activity. That is the manifestation of, that's the only way I can understand or, take in what an enlightened person is. I'm not that interested in what happens in your mind. I'm interested in what I and other people do. And so that's just my angle on it. It's not that it, yes, we have to bend it towards justice. It's hard, we have to have great strength and persistence to do that.
Alan, I submit that you have been doing that, and I submit that your action has been spontaneous. And I don't think that you made a deliberate choice. I think, should I bend it toward the bad or to the good? Well, I think I'll bend it toward the good.
Yeah.
No, I think you've been spontaneously Hosan, and that's arisen, more or less on its own accord.
Thank you. And just, this is where I'm going to leave it, but there's this kind of dividing line in Japanese Buddhism. There are the self-power schools and the other power schools. So Zen is theoretically a self-power school, and things like Pure Land or Jodo Shinshu are other power schools. And I think that this is a completely pointless distinction. With whatever I have done or whatever I do spontaneously, it goes back to what I was saying before about it comes from somewhere. And the thing is, I don't know where it comes from. I don't, I honor that. And it comes, there's something mysterious there, and I love the mystery.